From the humble field gun to the colossal heavy howitzers. Hi, I'm your host Heatwave, and in today's lore episode, we'll be exploring the Imperial Army's artillery and ordnance. Infantry. They win fights. Tanks. They win battles. Artillery? They win wars. Welcome back to the Wings of Fire spin-off series, Empire of Pareena. In today's lore episode, I'll explore the artillery company's organization, equipment, and tactics. But I'll also be covering the heavy weapons platoon, a part of the rifle companies. So let's begin at the start. Way back during the War of Unification, before Common Date, we have the first example of an artillery weapon. The Tyrant's Legion operated some 16 large slingshot devices. Made of multiple wooden logs, locked together by steel caps, and a large Hessian sling, this contraption was used to throw burning cactuses up to 300 meters. It was not a popular weapon. It was heavy, hard to move effectively, and the War of Unification was dominated by more mobile fighting than long sieges. The slingshot fell out of use by the forming of the new empire. The next resemblance of an artillery weapon wouldn't come till 1466. In 1402, gunpowder was discovered by rainwings. They found that if the seeds of the keyline sunflower is grinded up, mixed with sulfur and softwood charcoal, it creates a violent and volatile propellant when ignited by a spark. But what would be later known as gunpowder was not a very popular product, as it basically had no use at the time of its invention. In 1407, it became a popular game among dragonettes. Using a small amount of gunpowder, it would be placed under a bowl, ignited, and the bowl would fly into the air. In 1466, there was a young dragonette sea-wing named Sea Salt. She dreamt of joining the Imperial Army when she grew bigger, and spent her time playing on the beaches of the Tail Island in a small mango farm community, building fortifications from sand and actively role-playing. Sea Salt, witnessing the power of gunpowder, came up with an audacious idea of creating a tool to launch coconuts. Gathering some thick sticks, some scrap metal lying around the farms, she created a long tube mounted on a tripod with a rock to weigh it down. Using a rock to ignite the gunpowder, she was able to fire a coconut over a dozen meters. Of course, it was very inaccurate, and would have a series of misfires, but it did work. When Sea Salt finally enlisted in 1473, she begged for her weapon to be accepted into the army. It fell upon uninterested ears. In 1506, black powder weapons were finally integrated into the Imperial Army, and the go-ahead was issued to Sea Salt, but a redesign was needed before the army could accept her weapon. So working alongside smiths and weapon artisans, Sea Salt created one of the longest-serving weapons of the Imperial Army. Simply called the 75mm infantry gun, was the first mass-produced heavy weapon being fully integrated into the Imperial Army by 1510. The gun was mounted on a simple wooden wheel carriage with a thin steel gun shield with a dual spade at the rear. The main gun was an extra-short, low-velocity 75mm that exclusively fired high-explosive shells. The gun was manned by a crew of 6 who had to tow the gun and ammunition manually. The 75mm infantry gun was formed into platoons of 3 guns and a gun commander. Tactically, they would be used to support infantry assaults or hammer fortifications. The 75mm has remained in service for the past 500 cycles. Of course, it gained a few updates like a new gun sight. Sea Salt, though, would retire from the army at 73 and found the Sea Salt Armory in 1537. The Sea Salt Armory is still around to this rotation and is the sole producer of weapons for the Imperial Army. In 2078, a new gun was put into service, all the upgrades and updates coming together to form a new gun. The 75mm IMP, or Improved, became the standard light field howitzer of the Imperial Army, replacing all other light guns. It features an all-new metal, making it a little bit lighter, slightly longer, low-velocity 75mm main gun, a new angled gun shield, a new 1.5 mag gun sight, and a more accurate traversing system. It still used the HE shells until 2110, when the new thermite tracer and white phosphorus tracer ammunition was issued. The crew was shortened to 3, a gun troop sergeant, a gunner, and a loader, who were just inductee artillerymen. The gun became more mobile with the introduction of the M1H hauler tank that could carry the crew, extra ammo, and the gun from position to position. This was the standard field ordnance of the Imperial Army and would be the most ubiquitous among its ranks. One more unorthodox weapons used by the Imperial Army are captured SSG long-barrel 76mm anti-tank guns. After the initial assaults into the Soviet lines during Operation Fractured Jaw in 2137, large quantities of these guns and ammunition were raided and looted from SSG stockpiles. Seeing its usefulness, it was adopted as a medium tank hunting gun. It was quite heavy for 3 Dragons to tow, and its ammunition was not infinite, leaving these guns to fulfill a more defensive role. The last major artillery weapon used by the Empire, and its pride and joy, is the colossal 203mm heavy howitzer. This gun leaves such a lasting impression that crews have nicknamed it the Earthshaker. The barrel leads to a base plate that the gun independently mounts to, being able to pivot on a 45-degree firing arc and elevate to a 75 degrees. The breech is located high up the gun to account for the massive shell. The fire control system, gun sight, and traverse system is mounted on a separate pillar. The carriage has 4 large spades to handle the massive recoil this gun produces, and its 2 large wheels swivel up when not in use. The Earthshaker needs a crew of 7 to fully operate effectively, and needs no less than 2 haulers to carry the gun and its ammunition. The Earthshaker is towed by a hook on the muzzle brake. The 203mm was originally created in 1717 to be mounted in the walls of the Imperial Palace for defense, but it was in 2090 that the Army got its talons on the guns. Crews working with the guns are told to keep their mouths open for as long as possible to balance the sound pressure of the gun firing. The inductee that man the artillery weapons are called artillerymen. In their basic training, these inductee spend very little time training as infantry, being sent to study and train on the guns. Mudwings fill a lot of artillery positions due to their natural strength. They can lift the heavy shells and tow the guns. Artillerymen wear the same kit as regular inductee, but their bakama displays an artillery gun marking. Now let's look at the formation of an artillery company. Each line battalion holds 3 artillery companies. Of course, you have your HU section. The company is led by a captain or major, along with the administrative clerks and orderlies. Below is the forward observer platoon. This platoon sprinkles out across the lines to zero in artillery. Armed with their radios, these spotters feed information back to gun platoons on fire missions. The company holds 3 platoons of light 75mm guns. A light gun platoon is a HU section and 2 gun troops containing the gun, crew, and the tow vehicle. The next is a single platoon of 76mm guns. The size of this platoon, or even if there is a medium gun platoon, depends on how many 76mm SSG guns are available. Their platoon structure matches the light gun platoon. Finally is the Earthshaker platoon. Like the others, it has a headquarters section and 6 gun troops containing its crew and tow vehicle. In combat, the artillery companies will run on standby. The light gun company ready to deploy in support. In combat, the artillery companies will run on standby. The light gun platoons ready to deploy in support of an assault, while the larger guns will be placed in pre-planned positions ready to provide fire support. Next, I'll take a quick look at the heavy weapons platoon of the rifle company. The heavy weapons platoon is designed to carry lightweight support weapons to meet any battlefield opponent, except for anti-tank duties. The platoon is formed like every other platoon, with a HU section of inductii and a lieutenant platoon leader. The platoon holds 3 troops of mortars. The mortar is a relatively new weapon, only being introduced into service in 2127. The standard M1 120mm mortar is crewed by 3 inductii and is capable of being broken down into smaller pieces to be carried by its crew. The mortar provides effective indirect fire support from a hidden or entrenched position, being able to throw HE or lay down a smoke barrage. The final set of troops is the M1 light repeating cannon. This is essentially a heavy machine gun, but what makes it different and classed as more of an autocannon is the sheer size of the shell. The M1 fires a 32mm cartridge on a belt-fed system. The gun is long, blocky and bulky, and it has quite a sheer recoil. Mounted on a tripod and given a gun shield, this weapon is heavy unless broken down into its own pieces. The gun requires a crew of 3 to use, having a troop commander, a gunner, and an assistant gunner, all responsible for carrying ammunition to feed this monster gun. The M1 was first introduced into the army in 2104. In combat, it's used to suppress enemy formations, allowing the relocation of infantry to new positions. Since I am talking about ordnance here, I'll quickly mention the large volume of SSG 88mm disposable infantry-held anti-tank rockets. After Operation Fractured Jaw, it became clear the effectiveness of these weapons against Imperial tanks, so much that when they could be captured, they were, and spread out across the infantry to provide them with some effective AT firepower. The warhead was a high-explosive anti-tank charge that created a cone of superheated copper to melt clean through armor. Its only drawback was that it had a terrible range at only 100 meters, and of course, once the shot was fired, that's it, there's no reload. The tube was simply thrown away and discarded. Thanks for watching. Please remember to leave a comment, like, or subscribe to help the algorithm present this content to a wider audience. And don't forget the channel goals with special rewards. This is Heatwave, signing off.